Willpower is not a personality trait. It is a battery, and every single day you are draining it without even realizing it. That is why the same person who resists dessert at lunch gives into it at 9 p.m. It is not weakness. It is depletion. We treat discipline like a switch you either have or you do not. But that is not how the mind actually works. And once you understand what is really happening inside your head, everything about how you approach discipline changes. We have been taught since childhood that discipline is a moral issue, that disciplined people are simply stronger or more committed or born with something the rest of us were not. This belief sounds harmless, but it quietly destroys people. Here is why. When willpower runs out, and it always does, most people do not think, my mental battery is empty, and I need to recharge it. Instead, they think, I am weak. I am lazy. Something is fundamentally wrong with me. That shame spiral is far more damaging than the original lapse ever was. A single missed workout or one night of doom scrolling instead of working is not the real problem. The real problem is the story you tell yourself afterward, the one that turns a normal human limitation into evidence of personal failure. And once that shame story takes hold, it becomes self-fulfilling. You start to believe you simply are not a disciplined person, so you stop trying as hard, which produces more failures, which reinforces the belief even further. This is the trap, not the lapse itself, but the meaning you assign to it. Psychologists call this phenomenon ego depletion, the theory that self-control draws from a limited mental resource, the same way a muscle tires from repeated use. Think about everything your brain processes in a single morning. What to wear, what to eat, whether to answer that email right now or later, whether to speak up in a meeting or stay quiet. Every one of these choices, no matter how small, pulls from the same limited reserve you will need later to resist procrastination, stay focused, or say no to a temptation. This is why willpower tends to be strongest in the morning and weakest at night. It is not a coincidence, and it is not a character flaw. It is simple biology. By the time evening arrives, you have already spent a full day's worth of decisions, and your reserve of self-control is running on fumes. This also explains something that confuses a lot of people. Why someone can be incredibly disciplined in one area of life, like their career, and completely undisciplined in another, like their health. It is not a contradiction. It usually means their willpower is being spent almost entirely in one direction, leaving nothing left over for the rest. And here is the part most people miss entirely. Discipline is not about having more willpower. It is about needing less of it. The most disciplined people you know are not fighting temptation all day using sheer force of will. If you look closely at their lives, you would notice something surprising. They are not white-knuckling their way through the day. They have built systems, environments, and routines that remove the need for willpower in the first place. In other words, discipline is not primarily an internal battle. It is an external design problem. So, how do you actually build discipline that does not rely on a willpower reserve that is always destined to run out? Here are 3 practical shifts that work, starting today. The first is reduce decisions, not motivation. Stop trying to convince yourself to want it more. Motivation is unreliable, and it fades the moment things get difficult. Instead, remove the decision entirely. Prep your meals in advance, so you are not negotiating with yourself over dinner at 8 p.m. Lay out your clothes the night before, so mornings require 0 decisions. Automate your savings, your workout schedule, anything you find yourself constantly renegotiating in the moment. Every decision you eliminate in advance is willpower you get to save for later when you will actually need it. The second is protect your mornings. Since willpower is at its highest earlier in the day, that is exactly when your hardest, most important task should happen. Not after lunch, not after you have already answered 40 emails and made a dozen small decisions. Protecting your morning does not mean waking up at 5 a.m. It means being deliberate about what gets your first, freshest hour of mental energy. Give that hour to the task that actually matters before notifications, meetings, and decision fatigue quietly eat away at your reserve. The third is design friction. Do not fight temptation. If a habit is hard to resist, stop relying on resisting it. That is a losing strategy over time. Instead, make the habit harder to access in the first place. Delete the app instead of promising yourself you will only check it for 5 minutes. Put your phone in another room while you work, instead of trusting yourself to ignore it face down on the desk. Keep junk food out of the house entirely, instead of relying on willpower every time you open the fridge. Discipline is not a fight you win through force. It is an environment you design carefully, so that the fight rarely has to happen at all. You do not need more willpower. You need fewer moments in your day where you are forced to use it. Stop blaming yourself for running out of a battery that was always going to run out eventually. That is not a personal failing. It is simply how the human mind works. Instead, start building a life and an environment that asks less of that battery in the first place. Reduce the decisions. Protect your mornings. Design friction around your weak points. That is the real psychology of discipline. Not more force, better design, and it is something you can start applying today. If this resonated, stay. There's more of this ancient wisdom and modern psychology built for real life coming next.